Hello, so this is a very improv video of me noticing the latest A16Z like the video on YouTube. And I feel like with their new branding, they're trying to convey a couple of things about their brand and about their approach and era of building and reviving the kind of American, how do you call it, like neo like constructivism, like Art Deco vibes and stuff. And I feel like there are many things that they're trying to portray, but they can't get a grasp on things, on how it should look like. So they're trying to kind of make a lot of things right. And I feel like in the chasing of some certain trends, they're actually kind of, damaging themselves a little bit because they're not really optimizing for the best picture. And I will try to take this, the reason I kind of starting this video is because I saw that on YouTube they released quite an interesting videos about their biggest fails and a bet. I kind of like that. But there was like the first comment that said, "Oh, this interior is amazing, you did such a great job." And I feel like this interior tries to be amazing, but it's not actually reaching that goal. And I wanted to just go in and, I'm not an interior designer. You can see that my background is shitty as well. But my background is not really prepared for this type of videos. I'm not like filming 16:9. I'm not like filming something very careful. I'm not wearing a suit, so it's a little bit more relaxed. In their vibe, there was an effort. And I feel like there was pattern of an effort that said like, okay, we really have to portray certain thing. So what I want to do is basically highlight the things that they could have done a little bit differently to make sure that, we are looking at the same picture and what they can actually improve. And there are a couple of things here that are working against them. So I will mark them with some kind of pen. So first of all, one of the things that I don't really like is the amount of mirrors. I feel like, for example, this mirror is very dangerous because you can see that it's kind of literally reflects something that happens up front, so it's getting like extra reflection. For camera work, it's a little bit too bad because you can see that whenever, like, it's going to be distracting from the main face because you will always see when the hands are moving, and especially if hands have some kind of, for example, you can see the ring, you can see the coffee cup, it kind of always distracts from the main character that is speaking. And it's very, very bad to act this way because the camera, like the people, will not see where to look for, right? Because this should be the main figure. Like should be first of all, then the interviewer should be the second of all, and then maybe some kind of interior glimpses should be on the very, very last place. They have to add to the vibe, but they shouldn't kind of be competitive in terms of the attention. And there are a lot of things that are competing here for this in trying to be like, nice or good or rich interior. It tries too hard. And the first thing is the amount of mirrors. And while these mirrors are okay because they're kind of reflecting just to evolve, so we can kind of pretend that it's just like a piece of art, or it's kind of like a continuation of the wall with just a frame, it's all good. One thing that I can point out is the amount of like golden glimpses. Like, these things are quite dangerous because they make it look like, why do you keep adding me? These things are adding like a little bit more like distractions again. Whenever something gets caught in those glimpses, it gets, competing with the main attention of the person that we're looking for. But there are other even bigger problems. For example, this huge lamp is the big problem. It's literally sitting between two people, and because this is like a 16:9 kind of format, the aspect ratio, basically it looks too symmetrical. It doesn't create, like, you actually like almost like look all the time at this lamp because it's kind of the brightest thing on this picture, and it's actually brighter than the person that sits in front of you, the one that you should be looking at and listening to. So there is already this kind of, contradiction here about this lamp. And honestly, I think I would remove this lamp and I would put maybe some kind of other decoration, more books, anything like maybe a piece of art here. It would just make so much more justice to the people that are sitting in front of it, rather than just, like putting the lamp here and being so loud. There are a couple of things here as well that kind of makes it a little bit worse and unintentional to my liking. For example, one of the biggest rules of every photo shoot is that you want to hide quartz. Quartz are really nasty. They sometimes like really don't make like a lot of justice, and especially when it's right in the middle of the frame, near the brightest object on the frame, it's obviously going to always stick out. And this is one of the things that you want to avoid, and usually people do that on the shooting days, but here it kind of slipped off, and it will always kind of haunt the people with good eye, or it will distract people without good eye, but they will not really understand why they're not looking at the actual kind of, at the person. There are other things as well that might be a little bit more like performative here. For example, this thing is very questionable, and there are a couple of reasons for that you can see. So first of all, the books are turned directly into the camera, which is a little bit of a mistake because you don't want to direct anything inside of the camera in so kind of way that it literally looks like a banner and it's easier to read. And you can see, by the way, I have the book here, but it's turned like upside down, so you're not really attracted to read it unless you kind of move some kind of, makes a kind of head movement. Here it's so conveniently placed. It's placed too conveniently, so you will end up always reading Dolce Vita, New York chic, Paris chic, and stuff like that. And you know that it's performative because they put the balls on top of it, which means that, no one is taking those books, no one is reading those books. Those are not books meant for reading. Those are meant to be like a decoration for the background. And they're also not being put like, in the way that, usually they would be put like either vertically or, for example, to the side, or maybe a little bit like scrambled. They're like literally being put here as a performative action, and I feel like it's just a little bit of like weak vibe. And by the way, there was an easy win. I would get that. Or maybe they put the book to hide something. For example, this socket, which is a very, by the way, the same as, the cord. You might hide actually the socket because it's not really giving a good polished vibes, and I feel like they didn't put the book here because they thought, oh, maybe it's going to be too close to a person, but right now the sockets are very close to a person, so not really sure about that. And like again, this light, I also kind of noticed that it's also happened to be right in the mirror, so there is actually the brightest objects in the middle of the frame with some kind of with the mirror. It just creates so much kind of visual attraction here, anchoring that it's really unnecessary. There is also like honestly a little bit like sad that there's like so much green here, like this green, this green, this green. The whole sofa is green, which takes so much space, but then the real kind of greenery here is only 3 leaves out of the whole kind of frame. And it feels like if you would have put, instead of this background or instead of the sofa, you would put a real greenery here, it would make so much better for the interior design and for the picture, because people are really attracted to greenery, especially the good one with big leaves, with kind of more rounded leaves, not the kind of the spiky ones. There was a lot of ways to win this picture, and I feel like it's really not like giving that in the best way possible. I also feel like there are a couple of like these weird things where this sofa is so pulled out to the back of the studio, but then I'm not sure people can actually stand there, and it's clearly visible how sofa is close to the wall because they're both in focus, so you can see that it's actually been like, it's almost like recently has changed or something, and it's like creating this weird vibe where this table is actually not usable. It's not like, it's really again performative, and it's a little bit like poorly designed as for me. I also noticed that by the glimpse, by the highlights on the foreheads and how it's positioned, I assume there is a big soft boxes happened like on the sides behind the cameras, so you don't see them, but they give this kind of focused look. You can also see this by like very sharp shadows here. It usually means that something is very kind of highlighting with the projector like from top of the people. It's probably like positioned somewhere here, but it feels like weird because they're also shining on this kind of these lamps. I think if lamps would be dimmer, like if they would just give like a slight contrast in the background, they would be way more attractive, because the whole purpose would be to highlight the person, people, and then the background would be just there for the vibes. And right now the vibes are shouting in you, and then you have two people in front of the vibes. That's how it feels. I also feel like I like the paper cup actually. I feel like paper cups are generally quite interesting, and they're giving this kind of vibe of like not being settled in, like a little bit more temporary. Plastic cups, questionable. Even without like plastic cup idea, the whole filming them is quite weird, because you can see here that they give a lot of highlights, they give transparency, they give like the different like, you know, small kind of droplets that makes it a little bit more like, you know, dirty. Combine this with the mirror table, you get double of that. So you get this kind of very, very bright distracting objects that are not that good. And I actually like the paper cups more. Would be nice to have some kind of stoneware or something, but to be honest, the paper cup would be also better than this. There are a couple of things that might have been improved here. So one of the things is actually the cutting off the people. You don't want to cut off like this, because it's literally cutting off like last 5% of the person, and it feels like you don't know what kind of shoes they have, and it's a little bit weird. This person is actually positioned a little bit better, because you can see like the full posture, you can see like the full like how they sit. It's kind of like it's quite understandable what's happening here. Here, like it's all good until you reach out the, you know, the feet, and if you're showing almost like the whole person, you want to show the whole person. Otherwise, you want to cut at some kind of places where maybe like higher, maybe like somewhere waist, or maybe even like here. It really depends on where it is. Usually the table position somewhere here. Maybe sometimes you want to, you know, show people like behind or near some stuff, but you definitely don't want to cut only the last, you know, piece of them in this case. As I said, this person is positioned a little bit better. Pillows are actually quite nice. I have this kind of problem that pillows are so dark here that they are conflicting with the back of the jacket, with the pillow, and with the shadow of the pillow together. So you just see a big black spot here, which is not really, really nice. And I think there are last kind of two comments that I can only say here. First of all, is this big thing. Because it's so, I would get it if it were a little bit like lighter, or like its shape is interesting, but I feel like it's so dark, and it kind of have this kind of very small kind of cut out of it. It really feels like, and it hides part of the person. It just doesn't feel like the right place. To be honest, if I could choose, I would probably move it here to the table, and I would put the books up here on the table. I feel like the books would cover a little bit of the mirroring, and this thing would actually be a little bit more interesting on the background, just as a vibe element. Here, when it covers things and it's not really covering a lot of like the mirror, it's just like a very, very tiny at the bottom. It just doesn't give the right vibe to me. It feels like it's eating its knee a little bit. So I'm not sure that's kind of the best thing possible. And the very last thing is that the wallpaper, I like this. This is like Art Deco-ish type of vibe. It's like, it's quite good. I think that this is not like utilized enough, like this kind of angles, because here there's a lot of angles and interesting shapes. Here it's like suddenly stops at this kind of like square, and maybe it's kind of just an illusion that it's actually also like angled, but I feel like it's just like the flat square here, and it's not actually like very, very positioned very well. I would say this green is very almost like contradicting with this green, like it connects them all together. I like where this person kind of sits between the colors. It makes like a lot of sense that, hey, you can see the actual kind of, you know, backgrounds, but again, you have the big wide splash of colors on the background, which distracts from the main thing, with this kind of greenery that connects with the sofa. Not good. But you also have this case where this white goes directly into this person's head, so it gets this kind of weird vibe. I honestly think that if there was like less colors and more big splashes using this kind of, you know, some kind of patterned angled things, it would give exactly the vibe that they're looking for. But I feel like they just didn't push enough, you know, to the very last piece, and therefore it kind of looks a little bit as it is. generally, yeah, and those kind of lights don't really give it a good justice. I feel like if you would just dim them or remove them or replace with greenery and just use the color in the people, it would be way, way better. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I wish I had more reviews from someone like this. I really want to see the reviews of people going into different like interiors and reviewing what can be better, like piece by piece. Apparently I should do it, but I want someone to do it. Anyways, thank you so much.